you were actually here last night, and unfortunately, Ann, we had a conversation this morning. What was the first word out of your mouth when you walked in the door? You're not going to give us the same sermon we heard last night. Well, I didn't preach last night, but the readings are the same. The message will be the same, but of course it may have a slightly different twist to it. Last Wednesday night, talking to the kids who were confirmed, and I'm still meeting with them for a couple of weeks. And one of the girls said to me, "How do we know? How do I know that all of this is true, that Jesus is really risen? What is it? How can you prove it to me?" And of course, with the wisdom of a 14-year-old, all that entails. But she's asking a legitimate question. She's asking about the meaning of faith. She may not use these words, but this is what she's saying. And she said, and these are her words essentially, not mine. They were no different, because I had them read this gospel. He said, they were no different. And I said, yeah, you've actually hit upon a point, a really important point. Personally, I do not judge people by what they say. I always judge them by what they do. That's the way I evaluate people. Who keeps their word, who follows through, who says what they mean, who obfuscates, who uses language, who has to ask me what is, that kind of stuff. That's how I evaluate people. And if I were to look at the group that's supposedly most intimate in following Jesus, I would say, what a bunch of idiots. Seriously. And I don't mean it to be cruel, but let's face it. It's as though their life for the last 1, 2, or 3 years had never changed. What we're told about them is they've gone back to the area they came from, which is the northern area, Galilee, the northern province, okay? And it's like they're acting like they've been laid off, okay? They're going back to their old lifestyle. They're going out fishing. They're going what they need to do, and I get that. You heard last night, these are commercial fishermen for the most part. This is how they make their living. And just because Jesus is no longer with them each and every moment of every day as they were, as they travel that journey for however many years they walk with him, it's just like none of that mattered, none of it happened. They've all put it behind them. And even though we have a woman by the name of Mary of Magdalene who said she encountered the risen Christ, even though they themselves had encountered him in that room, Thomas put his fingers into the holes of his hands. Still nothing. It doesn't make any sense. Nothing mattered. They just go back to what they were. Now, from the Gospels, you might get the impression that they might have been commercial fishermen, but they weren't very good at it, because every time they encountered Jesus and he's asking them, would it be caught, the answer was the same. And it's one of those things I have to smile at, because it's one of those things you definitely would not put in if it were not true, because you don't want to make yourself look bad. They recognized the sound of his voice. He called them by name, and they recognized the sound of his voice. And that's what makes John say, hey, it's the Lord. And that's why Peter decides, somebody I got to talk to, and with his usual impulsivity, jumps right back in, swims back, which is really interesting when you figure that he was the guy who got them out in the boat in the first place. And it's like, yeah, fine, they're doing all the work, he jumps off the boat, comes back home. Again, done. He gathers this group around him, and what does he do? He shares a meal. He doesn't preach at them, he doesn't lecture them, he doesn't say to them, what's wrong with you? He says, look at me, I'm real. This is real. I've got work for you. Why are you here? And you can take that from Bishop Smith's talk last night, and you can take that from the scriptures today. It's the same question. Everyone has got an answer. Why are you here? We have work to do. The most important things we do as a Christian doesn't happen here. This is where we are nourished. This is where we take strength. This is where we are fed spiritually. But the work that we do takes place out there. And speaking of work, the next thing he says is you, Peter, the one with the big mouth, in my office. You got to talk. He asks a really poignant question. Simon, son of John, as people were known by the dad, do you love me more than these? These what? Do you love me more than these? What's he pointing to? His hand went out and pointed at something. What does the question mean? And it's really important. Many possibilities. A lot of people bring a lot of very erudite sermons and scholarly treatises on it, and I don't pretend to be one of them. But I find it that it's a choice of three things. Or maybe it was all three together. Maybe they're not mutually exclusive. He could have been pointing to all of the stuff that they just thrown off the boat. The fishing tackle, the nets, all the things they were using. And he's saying, Simon, tell you what, do you love me more than that? That's your whole life. Do you love me enough to take on the work that I want to give you? Or maybe he's pointing to the other group. And he's asking, do you love me more than you love them? You want to be leader, but when you had the opportunity, you ran away. The cost of leadership is really a very severe one. Do you love me more than even they're capable of loving you? And I will take one exception to what the bishop said last night. I do think, and most Christian scholars do believe, Peter truly was commissioned as head of that group. There's no question that Jesus had a very special relationship with him. Now we can have a theological argument about, does that mean that the Pope, as successor of Peter, carries on the same relationship that Peter had? But we can't deny the scriptures that Jesus saw leadership qualities in this man and really made him a pillar for his brothers to lean on. He said, do you love me more than they are? Are you capable of loving me so you can strengthen them? Considering your track record ain't that great. Or do you love me even more than they love me? Are you capable of truly being the person who will feed, nurture, care for all of those who will follow you? Just as we heard last night, every single Christian is called to do that. Are you ready to take this on? We're going to be blessed in the next couple of weeks. Next week, little Mr. Theodore is going to become a member of the Christian community. A couple of weeks after that, Mr. Leanna is going to become a member of the community. All right? And we will stand before God and we will reaffirm our faith when we renew our baptismal vows in the same way that her parents and godparents are taking those vows for these two little children. And the Lord, who is our shepherd, watches us and says, okay, you say this is important,